Joe had been running the same barber shop for 40 years. Everyone in town knew him. Nobody questioned much until that morning when a young Navy SEAL lieutenant came in for a haircut. The moment he grabbed his arm, the serviceman's face went pale. "Sir," he whispered, trembling. In that moment, time stopped in the barbershop. Welcome to Silent Heroes. Before we begin today's story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, hit that subscribe button to support us. Joe Martinez, 67 years old, gray hair, medium height, calm face, always wearing a white apron. A faded tattoo on his left arm that no one notices. Small American town near Virginia Beach. Main Street Barbershop. Old-style American barbershop with red, white, blue pole. Vintage barber chair. Walls covered with old American photographs. Joe opened his shop every morning at exactly 7:30 a.m. Same routine, same precision. First, he'd clean the windows, then wipe down the barber chair, arrange his tools, brew his coffee. A ritual unchanged for 40 years. The townspeople knew him, but didn't really know him. They'd call him Joe the Barber, and nothing more. They never asked where he was from, about his family, his past, and he never told. Every day the same customers would come. Retired Mr. Johnson for a haircut, young Tommy for a beard trim, and Dr. Phillips after Sunday breakfast. They all loved Joe, respected him, but none of them knew who he really was. Joe's hands were always steady, never trembling, controlling the razor with sensitive precision. Customers thought this came from just 40 years of experience, but Joe's hands had actually learned much different things: precision shooting, bomb disposal, and saving lives. On the walls of the shop hung old town photographs. Joe's younger years, town festivals, the local football team. But in one corner, there was an unframed photograph, 8 young soldiers in the desert, fully equipped. Joe wasn't visible in the photo. At least nobody could see him. But he looked at that photo every day. His eyes would always drift there during a shave. His customers described Joe as a peaceful man. He was never in a hurry, never got angry, never spoke loudly. But sometimes, especially when PTSD veterans came in, he talked to them differently. He seemed to understand. He empathized. And none of them questioned this. Joe had one strange habit. When shaving customers' arms, he'd unconsciously cover his own left arm, as if he was trying to hide something there, but nobody paid attention. They just thought it was a habit. The town's youth loved Joe, especially those going into the military. They enjoyed talking with him. Joe would only tell them, "Be careful, you're never alone." He wouldn't share anything else, but the young men drew strength from his understanding gaze. That morning, everything started normally. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, 24 years old, from Navy SEAL Team 6, Asian American, recently returned from deployment, showing signs of PTSD. At 9:15 a.m., the door chimed. When Joe looked up, a young soldier stood in the doorway. Navy SEAL uniform, clean-shaven face, but exhaustion in his eyes. Joe immediately understood. This kid had just returned from war. "Good morning, sir," Joe said calmly. "Haircut?" Marcus entered, looked around. The walls felt familiar to him, like every barbershop. But there was something different about Joe's manner. He wasn't treating him like other civilians did, with hero treatment, just respectful distance. "Yes, just a simple trim, please," as Marcus sat in the chair. As Joe tied the apron, he noticed Marcus's arms. There were fresh marks, recently inserted IVs, probably at a military hospital. Joe asked nothing, just focused on his work. "How long since you returned?" Joe asked while lathering soap. 2 weeks, still trying to adjust. Joe nodded.
He'd heard this conversation thousands of times, but he never mentioned that he'd lived it. During the haircut, Marcus began to relax. Joe's hands were so steady, almost therapeutic. There was silence for a while. Then Marcus spoke. "Have you always been a barber here?" "For a very long time. Never tried anything else." Marcus found this strange. There was something military in Joe's manner, his tone, his posture. But he didn't ask questions. He respected someone who understood his own silence. When Joe started trimming his arms, Marcus relaxed. He'd closed his eyes, almost falling asleep. While Joe worked carefully, he noticed the faded tattoo, 2003 to 2006, Afghanistan, written in small letters. "You were a good soldier." "Have you seen better?" Marcus asked, eyes still closed. Joe paused for a moment, then continued trimming. "I have," he said simply. Marcus opened his eyes, looked at Joe through the mirror. There was something in the barber's face, understanding, empathy, but something deeper, a familiar weight. "Were you military too?" Joe's hand trembled a second, very small, barely noticeable, but Marcus saw it. "SEAL training taught you these details." "Long time ago, a very different time." Marcus grew curious but didn't push. Protocol with veterans was clear. If they want to tell you, they will. If not, you show respect. When Joe finished the trim, Marcus examined his reflection in the mirror. It was perfect, professional, done with military precision. "This kind of precise work is only taught in certain places," Marcus said carefully. Joe looked at him, a flash of something old in his eyes. "Precision saves lives, young man." Marcus felt the weight in that sentence. This wasn't casual barber talk.
Joe Martinez, no hand tremor, military posture but hidden. Navy SEAL trident tattoo on left arm, always keeps it covered. Marcus Chen, suspicious but respectful, detail-focused. As the haircut finished, Joe gently lifted Marcus's arm for final checks. In that moment, Marcus saw something on Joe's left arm, a faded line emerging from under his clothing, an ink trace. Marcus froze, because he recognized that shape. "Mr. Martinez," Marcus said, lowering his voice, "on your arm." Joe immediately pulled his arm back, adjusted his sleeve. "Youthful mistake," he said quickly. But Marcus's eyes had sharpened. That shape, that position, that size. He knew this wasn't coincidence. Navy SEAL trident tattoos were done in only one place, and only certain men could get them. "What years did you serve?" Marcus asked, the casual tone completely gone from his voice. Joe looked at him for a long time. A calculation was going on behind his eyes. Tell or hide? 1972 through 1994, he said finally. Navy. Marcus's pulse quickened. Those years, 1972 Navy, post-Vietnam, Cold War era, covert operations. Joe's age fit exactly too. "Which unit?" Marcus asked, now openly. Joe was washing his hands, stayed silent for a long time. Then he took the towel, dried slowly. "Special operations," he said only. Marcus's chest tightened. "Were you a SEAL?" Joe turned to him, this time with a different expression in his eyes. Tired, but strong. "You're a SEAL too, son. You know what that means." That sentence changed the atmosphere of the barber shop. Joe was no longer a barber. Marcus was no longer a customer. They were two SEALs, two men recognizing each other. "Which team?" Marcus asked now, with full respect in his voice. "Team 2, Joe said. "Long time ago. You?" "Team 6. Just returned from Afghanistan." Joe nodded. "Was it hard?" Marcus's eyes grew misty. "We lost people. Joe touched him gently on the shoulder. "We always do, son. We always do." In that touch, Marcus understood who Joe really was. This wasn't just an old soldier. This was someone who had experienced very special things, come from very special places. "How many tours?" Marcus asked. "Enough," Joe said. "You?" "This was my third." Joe nodded. "Will you go again?" Marcus hesitated. Nobody had asked him this so directly. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Good. Not knowing is the most honest answer." Then Joe began looking at Marcus differently. He was no longer a customer. He was a brother. "The tattoo on your arm," Marcus said. "Can I see it?" Joe stopped, thought for a long time, then slowly rolled up his sleeve. There, faded but unmistakable, was a Navy SEAL trident. Old style, vintage, the kind only certain generation SEALs wore. Underneath, in small letters, 1975 to 1990. Marcus held his breath. Team 2, 1975. "Oh my God. Who am I?" Joe asked calmly. Suddenly Marcus remembered the legendary stories from training. Post-Vietnam SEAL operations, Cold War missions, unclassified operations, and nameless heroes. "You're one of those operators, from the legendary ones." Joe smiled, but it was a tired smile. "Not legendary, son. Just old."
The barber shop is now a sacred space where two SEALs meet. Joe calm, but no longer playing a role. Marcus respectful, but excited. Marcus sat back in the chair, but no longer in customer position. Joe had also dropped the barber role. They both knew the mask had fallen. "What operations were you on?" Marcus asked, with childlike curiosity in his voice. Joe put down his razor, turned to the window. "The kind that aren't talked about," he said. "The kind that don't make it to records." "I know that kind too," Marcus said. "Our last mission was like that too." Joe turned to him, understanding in his eyes. "How many men did you lose?" "2," Marcus said, his voice breaking. Joe nodded. "Names?" "Rodriguez and Walker." Joe repeated those names quietly, like saying a prayer. "Remember them," he said. "Every day remember them, because you owe them that." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Nobody had told him this so clearly. "Do you remember yours too?" he asked. Joe turned to look at the photo on the wall. "Every day," he said. "All 6 of them." Marcus looked at the photo, this time carefully. There were 8 people, so that meant 2. 6 missing? 6, Joe said quietly. "Only Wilson and I came back. Wilson died of cancer in 2008 too." Heavy silence fell in the barber shop. Marcus felt that moment, that weight, survivor's guilt, loss, decades of silence. "Is this why you opened the barber shop?" he asked. Joe looked at him. "Is this why you go to war?" The question hit Marcus, because it was true. Adrenaline, brotherhood, purpose, but more than that, survival guilt. Your friends die, you live, and somehow you have to earn it. "I understand," Marcus said. "You understand, but you need to learn one more thing." Joe pulled out a box from behind the chair, small, metal, locked. When he opened it, there were several medals inside, Navy Cross, Silver Star, Purple Heart. But at the bottom was something special. A challenge coin, old, heavy, one side with Navy SEAL trident, the other side, Team 2, Cambodia 1976, still here. "What is this?" Marcus asked. "Given to me by one of the last 2 survivors, Wilson, before he died. Someone should remember," he said. "You remember." Marcus took the coin, felt its weight. This wasn't just metal, this was history. "Why did you never tell anyone?" Joe looked at him. "Because telling is the easy part, son. The hard part? Living it every day, remembering every day, and every day trying to live worthy of the friends who died. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. This wasn't taught in training. This wasn't in the manual. "So what do I do?" he asked. You live. You'll have children. You'll be a good father to them. And every night before you sleep, you'll say Rodriguez and Walker's names because they sent you home." Marcus started crying, silently but truly. Joe handed him a tissue, said nothing, just stood beside him. The door chimed again.
Tommy Rodriguez, 19 years old, younger brother of Marcus's lost partner, about to join the Navy. The young man who entered froze when he saw Marcus crying. "Sorry," he said, trying to back out. "No," Joe said. "Come in, son." The young man hesitantly entered. Marcus immediately wiped his face, straightened his posture. "I'm Tommy," the kid said. "Tommy Rodriguez." "Rodriguez?" Marcus asked. "Was this that Rodriguez?" "Rodriguez, yes, my brother Carlos was military, Navy SEAL, in Afghanistan." Marcus stood up. "Carlos Rodriguez? Team 6? Tommy's eyes widened. "Did you know him?" Marcus's voice was trembling. "He was my partner." Time stopped in the barber shop. Joe, Marcus, Tommy, all three frozen. Tommy's eyes filled with tears. Were you with him that day?" Marcus nodded. "The last day we were together." Tommy collapsed, sat in a chair, put his head in his hands. Joe immediately came to both of them. "Sometimes," he said calmly, "life brings people together in strange ways." Marcus turned to Tommy. "Your brother was a hero, Tommy. He saved me that day. I remember him every day." Tommy asked through his tears, "Did he suffer?" Marcus hesitated. Truth or comfort? He looked at Joe. Joe nodded. Truth. "No, it was very quick. And his last words? Tell Tommy to finish school." Tommy cried out. Joe held him like a father. "Be a man worthy of your brother's memory," Joe said. "Give his sacrifice meaning." At that moment, the shop door opened again. This time, it was elderly Mr. Wilson, one of the town's residents, Joe's old friend. When Wilson looked inside, he understood the situation. "I don't want to disturb," he said. "No, Mr. Wilson, come in. These boys are special." Joe had never described anyone as special. "This young man," Joe pointed to Marcus, "is a Navy SEAL, Afghanistan veteran." Wilson's attitude changed. He bowed respectfully. "And this young man," Joe pointed to Tommy, "is a hero's brother." Wilson was now completely serious. Joe continued, "And I once walked the same path they did." Wilson's mouth fell open. "Joe? You—" Joe rolled up his sleeve, showed the tattoo. Wilson gasped. "Damn, Joe," Wilson said. "You've lived next to me for 40 years and never said anything." There was nothing that needed saying. But now these boys are here, and they need to know. Marcus stood up. "Know what?" Joe took the coin challenge, handed it to Marcus. "You didn't come here alone," Joe said. "Carlos sent you. For this understanding, for this connection." Marcus took the coin, felt its weight. "And you, Tommy," Joe turned to the young man, "will you follow your brother's path?" "I'm joining the Navy," Tommy said with determination. "There are things I need to teach you."
The barber shop is now an unofficial veteran meeting point. Joe has dropped his secret identity, now in community leader role. From that day forward, the barber shop changed. Joe was no longer just Joe the barber, but nobody called him sir or by his rank. He was still Joe, but now a different Joe. Marcus started coming every week, not for haircuts, but to talk. Joe would listen, give advice, but never act like a teacher, just like an understanding older brother. Tommy would come too, after school, to hear stories from Joe. But Joe wouldn't tell war stories. He'd tell life stories. How to stay strong, how to find yourself, how to find purpose. A month later, Wilson told the story to a few friends, but he didn't give special details, just said, "Joe is former Navy." Word started spreading in town. Men from the veteran community started coming. Vietnam veterans, Iraq veterans, young guys back from Afghanistan. Joe's shop became an unofficial veteran hangout. But Joe allowed this because he knew it was necessary. These men needed a place to talk, and Joe could be the listening ear. One day, while Marcus was getting a shave, he asked, "Do you ever regret it, staying hidden?" Joe thought. "Staying hidden protected me," he said. "But sometimes men die alone because nobody understands them." "Is it different now?" "Now," Joe looked at Marcus through the mirror, "now I have a purpose for you guys." Marcus understood. Joe was viewing his retirement as a second career, unofficial mentorship. "Is there nobody else from Team 2? Marcus asked. Joe shook his head. "Wilson died. The others missing. Records? Classified. Officially, none of us were there." Marcus felt this weight. Joe wasn't just a survivor, he was also a living memorial, the memory keeper of his entire team. "Is this why you opened the barbershop? Quiet life?" "Not quiet life. Purposeful life. Every customer a conversation. Every conversation a connection. And sometimes, someone like you comes." Marcus understood. Joe wasn't looking for a mentor. Joe was waiting, ready for young people who needed mentorship.
Joe now full veteran mentor. Marcus healed but responsible. Tommy motivated and focused. By the end of the month, Joe's shop had become the town's veteran hub, but casual, not forced, just a place the guys knew about, a safe place. Marcus was improving. He'd started going to therapy, but conversations with Joe helped too, because Joe wasn't clinical. Joe was experiential. Tommy had decided he'd join the Navy, but not SEAL team. He'd become a hospital corpsman. "My brother fought," he'd said. "I'll heal." When Joe heard this, his eyes welled up. "Carlos would be proud," he'd said. One day, Marcus brought a surprise, a challenge coin, but new, from Team 6, dated 2023. "Whole team signed it," Marcus said, "for you." Joe took the coin, read it. "For Joe Martinez, Team 2 legend from Team 6 brothers." "How do they know?" Joe asked. "I told him," Marcus said. "Just basics, but respect is spreading." Joe nodded. There was no point in hiding anymore. That week, something unexpected happened. A 3-star general, retired, came to his shop. Casual clothes, nobody recognized him. "Joe Martinez?" he asked. "Yes." "General McKnight, retired. I'd like to speak with you." The shop went quiet. Joe understood. He'd been found. "About what, General?" 1976, Cambodia, Operation Silence. Joe froze. Nobody had spoken the name of that operation for 50 years. McKnight continued. "Files were declassified last week, officially." Joe trembled. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he pulled out a coin, "you can tell it now, and you need to tell it." Joe looked at the coin. Presidential Unit Citation, Team 2, 1976. "Why?" he asked. "Because," he looked at Marcus, "the new generation needs to know. They're continuing your legacy." Marcus understood. Joe wasn't just a veteran. Joe was living history.
Joe, now open, veteran mentor, community pillar. Barbershop is unofficial veteran center. 3 months later, a small plaque hung in Joe's shop. Veteran gathering place. All welcome. Marcus had become a regular customer, but no longer for therapy, for friendship. Tommy had joined the Navy, visited Joe every leave. Joe still cut hair, but was no longer secret. He didn't tell war stories, but gave guidance. He was a listening ear. The town had changed. Veterans were shown more respect because they had Joe's example. They'd seen what quiet strength meant. And Joe finally looked peaceful. After 40 years, the burden was shared. Final scene: Joe, closing shop in the evening, looks at the wall photo. No longer alone, Marcus and Tommy beside him. "Still here," he says quietly. "Still here." Sometimes the greatest heroes are in the quietest corners, in the barber shop, at the market checkout, at the bus stop. It's our responsibility to notice them. Have you ever met someone like this? Someone who lived through great things quietly, but never told? Tell us in the comments. Give their names, because they deserve to be remembered too. Subscribe, share, and help these stories live, because silent heroes are waiting for silent support.